It's Radio 2, and ladies and gentlemen, Tony Banks has a new album out. It's called Six Pieces of Orchestra. Tony, how are you?
I am very well, thank you.
It's very good to see you, sir.
And you.
There was a quote from you a few years ago at the end of some, was it the reunion tour? I can't remember. And you were all being asked about what you were hoping to do in the future. And I think you were suggesting that you wanted to go back to composing and to come up with some orchestral piece. How long is it? Because you've written this 6 pieces for orchestra, a classical piece, which we're going to play some in just a moment. How long have you been thinking of doing this again?
Well, I suppose since I finished the previous one, 7, I'm good with titles, as you can see, which was about 6 or 7 years ago. And I felt that I'd learned an awful lot doing that, and I wanted to have another go at it. I felt I could do it a bit more sort of, with a bit more confidence. Last time I was a bit frightened of everybody, the orchestra.
Why would you do that? When you've achieved and sold as much as you have, why would you?
Yeah, well, rock music, orchestra music, orchestral guys, sometimes they look down their nose at you a bit.
But you're employing them, you're giving them money.
Well, I know I was. I felt exactly the same thing. No, totally the same thing. But when I just felt the first time, it was just down to me, really, I think, my own self-confidence. So the second time, I just wanted to go in there bed prepared, and I also went to use an orchestra in Prague. And the people over there, to be honest, were definitely... they included some Genesis fans for a start. It was definitely a different attitude over there. They were definitely keener to see the thing through and to do a good job on it, I felt.
Explain the difference then in composing or writing a piece of music, a rock piece which has orchestration, to a piece that is just purely for the orchestra.
Well, for me, I love writing for the orchestra because I don't feel I have to get into sort of any of those sort of, pop formats, the songs. You haven't got to have verses, choruses, middle eights and everything like that. I've always been a bit of a rambler. In my early days, with Genesis, as people know, we had songs, 26-minute long songs.
Noodly.
Yes, I like to do a bit of that, you see. And I honestly think the noodles are the best bits. Of course, this may be wrong, but I do enjoy those bits. So I like to go through, not repeat, and not necessarily do the obvious thing. And, with a classical piece of using an orchestra of a 10-minute piece, you can go through all sorts of changes. And some of these, do go through quite a lot with very little repetition. Others have more structure. But, it's just a fun way. I love the sound of an orchestra for a start. And having worked with a group over the years, I mean, after I did 7, I was craving the sound of drums a little bit. But after a sort of a year and a half or whatever it was we had with the group, I had sort of 2 drummers behind me. I sort of had just about enough of drums and quite wanted to get back to...
Who is that drummer?
Which one? Chester Thompson? I can't remember what the other one's called, actually.
So, you compose... How? Do you sit with lots of empty pieces of paper in front of you? Do you sit at a piano? What's the process? How would you do it?
Well, it normally starts with the piano, or I have all the synthesizers. I just sit there and I will, if I have something, I might set it up with the synthesizer with sort of string sounds, maybe flutes and oboes, and just improvise and see what happens. Piano is obviously one of my main starting points, and some of the pieces sort of I start off with the piano and kind of orchestrate it from there. But on this particular record, I've taken the piano completely out of it. There's actually no piano on it at all, and I don't play on it, which has been my aim ever since I came to this business, actually, was to have a record that I wasn't on. It may sound strange in a way, but I never set out to be a performer, really. I wanted to be a writer. And in the early days of the group, Genesis, we ended up recording our own stuff because nobody else would do it. And that's really how it started, and that was with all of us, well, certainly with the original band, which included Peter and Mike. But, over the years you get to enjoy it a bit, but I just wanted to not to have the distraction of being a performer as well.
Were there classical influences that when you were all at school together, so we're talking about the early 60s, was there classical influence in your life anyway?
A certain amount. My mother was keen, I used to listen to a certain amount of stuff. I mean, some of the standard things you might say, like The Planets by Holst and Ravel's Bolero and things like that, were very much there. I listened to all the show stuff as well. My mother had all sort of South Pacific and My Fair Lady and all that stuff, which was a big influence. And when we were at school, and funny enough, the hymns were we had to sing these things every day, slightly against our will. There's some good tunes there, and they definitely had an effect on us, I think. And we just loved sort of melodies and things. And when the 60s was sort of, I got so into pop music from about 61 when I was 11 years old. I told him how old I am now. No, that's anyway. But then the Beatles, obviously, when I was about 13, and that was such a big moment for me, all that stuff. And I was a complete pop fanatic, really, for the next 5 or 6 years. So I probably didn't listen that much to classical music at that point.
So you've returned to it in later life, or?
Well, yes, I came to it when I went to university. I started listening again and got into people like, I think things like Death in Venice came out, and that got me very into Mahler, which is obviously the music was used very extensively in that. And also Shostakovich at that time, and certain people who I'd learnt on the piano, like Rachmaninoff and Ravel, were very strong. And I just found myself, I used to go to the Fulham Library, had a record library at the time, and I used to just borrow records and we'd come back and play them, and if I could I'd tape them. Did you
not know that home taping was killing music? Did you not know that?
Certainly is now. But in those days it was, I think it was perfectly, it just trying to educate myself a little bit into what was out there, really, and I got more and more into it, really. And the rest of Genesis, perhaps apart from Steve Hackett, the rest of the group weren't really into classical music, but Steve and I used to sort of have a few things he turned me on to quite a few people in those days, Eric Satie and Al Benoni and people like this who now become something of a cliche, actually, those people, but at the time were virtually unknown.
And used for ads, aren't they?
Well, that's right, and they have a strange thing, but we both got into, I remember Death in Venice and the Adagietto from Mahler's Fifth Symphony being something we both really loved, and at the time that was totally unavailable, you couldn't buy it anywhere. And we both ended up buying the Fourth Symphony, which was available on Ace of Spades or something. So, we did sort of have a bit of that, but to be honest, the other members of the group weren't that into it, and the influences in the group were quite varied.
So the CD, the whole collection is called 6 Pieces for Orchestra. We're going to play a section of, this is a 10-minute 21, which, in Genesis terms is about par for the course. So clearly we're not going to play all of it. This is called Blade. Give us all the context and all the things to listen out for in this piece of Blade.
Well, on this record, I used 2 of the pieces had solo instruments leading them. The first piece, called Siren, has a saxophone leading it, and the third piece, which is Blade, has a violin playing it. And I found this very exciting violin player called Charlie Siem, who was recommended to me, and he has a real sort of performing flair, I think, and it's quite a virtuosic piece, and it has a few bits and pieces in it. And
is it quite noodly?
No, I don't think it's noodly. It's if it recalls anything, it recalls, if people remember that far back to early Genesis days, we did songs like the Cinema Show and things like that. I think it recalls, to some extent, that attitude. It's a solo on a kind of back cloth. But I think it gets quite exciting. We won't get that far, I know, but it gets very exciting in the middle.
It's still worth turning up as loud as you can, I think. So from Tony Banks' new CD, which is called 6 Pieces for Orchestra, is Blade. I'm looking for a 3.5 minute edit on this, Tony. Is this a really insensitive place to start talking?
I feel we are about to start talking. It's always insensitive. There's a nice change there, but you know, it's.
Okay, hang on. We'll shut up then. Here we go. There's an obvious fade point there, I think. It's very difficult. I mean, you've constructed this. I mean, that's an absolutely stunning and beautiful piece of music, and I do apologise for not playing
thank you.
10 minutes and 21 seconds of it. Explain where Blade fits in the other 6 pieces. What's the theme that runs through all?
Well, the theme is a slightly loose one, really. I mean, when I finished the pieces, I didn't really have any particular visual idea for them or anything, any titles, and people said, you've got to give them a title. So I wanted to call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, but it didn't go down very well.
Prosaic,
well, a bit prosaic, or else call them sort of adagio and things like that, which I quite like. But that sounded a bit pretentious. So anyhow, what I ended up doing was thinking that really with the 2 soloists, you could look at them as like 2 protagonists in a story. So Siren being the female protagonist and Blade, who's the one you just heard, being the male protagonist, a sort of Zorro type figure, I suppose. And the rest of the pieces could be the sort of telling the story, the journey in between, particularly the last 2 pieces fitted quite well with that. Penultimate piece being very contemplative, a kind of like, do I do this, do I do that? And the last piece being a sort of more of a, I call it City of Gold, which is a sort of a El Dorado type destination piece. People who know Genesis very well know I used City of Gold before in A Trick of the Tail. So, you know, little hint back there, if you like. But it's, you know, so the titles shouldn't be sort of, they're not kind of supposed to be something you should really, really take on board, but they just help to give a slight idea to it, I think.
Was there not a single point where you thought, can I just play? I would just like to be a part somewhere. No, don't play it like this, play it.
No. I'm very happy to sort of. I love just watching them and saying, "You do that." I enjoy kind of seeing sort of. It was such a beautiful sound coming back at me, and I just wanted to kind of, you know, make certain it sounded good. I did play on 7. I played a little bit because I felt it needed a little bit of help there, but I didn't feel it on this one. And we really constructed the pieces, and I worked with this arranger guy called Paul Englishby, and he was great help too. And there's sort of we worked very hard to make certain the piano wasn't necessary. And the piano did feature quite heavily, for example, in that last piece, but I don't think you really missed it at all.
This from Richard Davis. Could you pass on my regards, please, to Tony? Really enjoying his new orchestral CD. Could you ask him if he has any plans on an orchestra performing it live? If yes, can I suggest the Liverpool Philharmonic? This is suggested.
Well, it's funny because actually the Liverpool Philharmonic have been suggested by other people, but it's I'd love to do it live. It's just a question of sort of you know, it's another sort of set of hoops and hurdles to go through and across to get there. That's the only thing for me. You know, to make the record it takes quite a bit because it's so out of what I normally do. It's a very expensive operation too, making these records, and you don't really get much back on them, I can assure you. And the same with a little bit with the stage thing. I don't know how it would work, but I would love to do it because I think the music could be very exciting played live. And
you could get Rick Wakeman's accountant to sort that, because he was used to go away. I mean, did he go away with more people on tour than you guys did?
I have no idea. We used to have quite a lot. Well, on the last Genesis tour, we used to have hundreds of people. But I mean, you know, you're putting on big shows. We were playing kind of stadiums and things. And when you're doing that, and you have 3 stages, they're leapfrogging each other. Each one takes a week to set up. I mean, it requires a lot of people. But this would be musicians having a lot of musicians rather than a lot of technicians, I suppose, which would be quite nice in a way. I would like to do it. It's a kind of dream, but it's just. You know, I'm not committing myself to it. And
would you conduct if you did?
No, I wouldn't conduct.
What would you do then?
I would watch.
Well, that's no good. I'm not gonna. I expect you to do something, Tony.
Well, I'll bow or something. Is that good enough for you?
Well, you know, maybe there could be a dummy keyboard, and you could just.
There's be someone up there who looks like me, but is extrovert and wants to be out there and do stuff. Actually, when you're guys conducting, I mean, you know, no one will know it's not me.
Do you miss anything from those tours and the rock and roll treadmill?
We really enjoyed the last tour. Was great fun, actually. I felt we had nothing to sell. We didn't have to sort of worry about what people thought of us. Only people who came to those shows were people who actually liked us. So we didn't have to worry about reviews or whether the record was selling or anything, and that was great, really, because that does get very in the way, I think. We'd had a sort of slightly disappointing time when we'd done the album we did with Ray Wilson as a singer rather than Phil Collins when Phil left, which we thought was a pretty good album, and I thought that on stage I think it came across really well. But a lot of people who kind of gave up on us a bit, particularly the Americans who wouldn't come to see us at all. We actually had to cancel the tour. So having gone through that rather bad experience, it was just lovely to come out and do the Turn It On Again tour. It was great. We were incredibly surprised at how many people wanted to come and see us. When we first talked about doing it, my assumption was we'd be playing kind of, theatres around Europe. I just, because you never know where you stand. I mean, Genesis tends to get very variable press, shall I say, within in England. So you never quite know what your status is. And so it was great fun. I mean, we could have done. We just did Twickenham and Old Trafford, and we could really have done another half dozen shows easily. And in many ways, I wish we'd come back and done a few more. But
But do you think now you've said everything that there is to say, and if that's the end, then that was a great place to finish?
Well, I'm very glad to have. It was a nice way to come back and just do that, because it did feel a little incomplete, particularly having done. As I say, the tour didn't go so well. Just to come back and sort of hit it home was great fun to do. I mean, I think it probably is it. I know Phil sort of physically, he's got a few problems in terms of being able to play the fast stuff anymore, which was quite a large element of that, because we were playing the early stuff. I can't see anything happening, but you never know, really. I mean, if the call came, I'm sure Mike and I would be sort of ready to raise our instruments one more time.
This from Chell in Shrewsbury. What a wonderful piece of music. It's given me goosebumps. Hooray for Tony Banks.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Simon. Loving Tony Banks there in sunny Devon. Excellent. Very reminiscent of early Genesis, but so much better production.
Well, that's true.
Completely gorgeous. I'll be buying it if I can in Calgary. That's Jay Fox. Does it have an international release, Tony?
It does actually. Yes, there's a few people out in Canada who seem to quite like it. It's yes, it's everywhere if you can find it. And there's always. Am I allowed to say Amazon? There's always Amazon.
Yeah. Steve in sunny Teddington. Loving this music, Simon. Very Barber and Vaughan Williams. Let's hear more. Is there a bit of?
Well, Vaughan Williams is often cited as a kind of influence. I do particularly like Vaughan Williams, particularly the Fifth Symphony, which I think is a fantastic piece of music. And I do hear it myself sometimes. But he's not my favourite composer, don't get me wrong, but I can't sound like them because they're too good.
Anyway, Steve says, let's hear some more. Can I play some Still Waters?
Play whatever you like.
Okay, tell me about this.
Well, Still Waters it's a calm, reflective piece between the two the two solos, which are a bit more sort of like. Or
I could play the Oracle. I don't know, which do you think?
Which do you want to play? Up to you.
Well, they're yours.
I can't answer that.
No, you have to. I'm not doing anything else until you tell me.
Depends how far you go. How much are you going to play?
Well, a couple of minutes, whichever.
Okay, play Still Waters. I probably slightly prefer it myself, but it's it's a more contemplative piece, but it's got some quite a couple of quite strong melodic elements in it. It's, if people know Seven, it's slightly more reminiscent of Seven than say the last piece was.
Might the next that one be 5?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? No, I
feel a box set.
I was quite looking forward to getting to 0, but it might take too long. So I kind of, I think I might stop at 6 and go somewhere else.
Tony Banks' pieces, and the CD is called 6 Pieces for Orchestra. Tony, really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Here's some Still Waters. It's another beautiful piece from Tony Banks. The collection is called 6 Pieces for Orchestra. Tony hung around just to listen to that. It sounds different on the radio. Because I think music does just sound different on the radio.
I think it does. Some things sound good on the radio and some things don't.
Simon,
I'll leave it to someone else to decide whether that was the case with that one.
This is Brian in Home Green. I usually hate modern classical pieces, but Blade was superb. If the other parts are as good, then it must be great. 3 minutes and 30 seconds of Blade was 3 minutes and 30 seconds of pure joy. Put the full 10 minutes on and get a coffee, Simon Ian, on the A47.
Good man.
Tony agrees with that. Tony Banks' new album sounds like the best new orchestral work in years. Top job, Pete in Sheffield. A lot of love for you, Tony, out there, as you know us very well. Thank you very much for coming in. 6 Pieces for Orchestra, Tony Banks.
BBC Radio 2.
Actually, I should say it's the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Paul Inglesby, which is the way you have to do this.